What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you something a little different. So I recently put up a poll on the channel, kind of just asking what game people wanted me to cover next as far as a few CRPGs go. Because what I normally do on this channel is a couple of things. One, I cover just a lot of CRPGs because it's a favorite genre of mine. And then I also just review games across the RPG spectrum, typically speaking, after achieving 100% on them, achievement and content-wise. So my goal was to start up a project basically on a CRPG between now and when Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous releases. Now the result of that poll was to basically do Baldur's Gate 1. I have played most of the old Infinity Engine CRPGs. However, most of those were years and years ago. In the case of Baldur's Gate 1, I haven't played this game, dedicated, so to speak, since high school, which for me was more than a decade ago at this point, which is actually important here because that is pre-Baldur's Gate Enhanced Edition. In fact, I don't even think you can buy the original Baldur's Gate not Enhanced Edition basically anywhere at this point. But a company called Beamdog has been working on enhancing, so to speak, all of those old Infinity Engine games, and as such has done a ton of work on improving all of them and adding features from some of the later games. So a lot of the features that you see in Baldur's Gate 2 have actually been added into Baldur's Gate 1, for instance. So with all of that said, bit of a long intro on this one, I thought it would be fun to compare my memory of Baldur's Gate 1 with the Enhanced Edition, which has content I have not played before. Because if you're unaware, the Siege of Dragonspear was actually put out by Beamdog in 2016. Siege of Dragonspear connects the first Baldur's Gate with the second Baldur's Gate, and actually kind of bridges the gap between those games. But Siege of Dragonspear is entirely done by Beamdog, not the original creators of the first or second game. Now, the Enhanced Edition of Baldur's Gate for the most part leaves the base game untouched as far as content goes. Most of what they focused on here was improvements and mechanical additions. The only content I would say that was added was the 4 companions that they added to the game. Aside from my memory and everything, I will say that those 4 companions are noticeably tonally different than the rest of the game, at least for me personally. Now, that's not to say they're badly written. I'm just saying that I could probably pick those companions out without knowing that they were added to the game later as being written by someone else. It is a noticeably different writing style, in my opinion. But while we're on the subject of companions, one of the things that I just apparently misremembered, honestly, or at least wasn't aware of at the time, there is, in total, about 30 companions in Baldur's Gate. Now, admittedly, a lot of them aren't very fleshed out. They usually only have one quest, and only a handful of them actually relate back to the main quest or anything. You won't necessarily get a lot of interaction out of the companions in Baldur's Gate 1. But again, I apparently just forgot about the sheer quantity of them. I only remember a handful from high school, and as it turns out, that was most of the ones at the beginning of the game. And while I did beat the game back then, it occurs to me that what I probably did was got the companions towards the beginning of the game and then just never used anything else. Because replaying the game, I am just tripping over these people. But that said, again, the content of the base game is largely untouched. That includes the Tales of the Sword Coast expansion pack. I will mention, however, I did not play Tales of the Sword Coast. The copy I had, I didn't have the expansion pack to it, so I just never got that content. So something I have been doing in my first playthrough here is doing all that content. I actually just wrapped up most of it. Gotta tell you guys, Durlag's Tower is an amazing dungeon. I'll probably talk more about that when I actually get around to the review. Honestly, that was an amazing piece of content. That was well done. And it's a shame I didn't play that actually when I played the original to begin with. But Beamdog did, again, actually add some mechanical elements to the base game, and this includes a few things. They added some subclasses and classes and stuff from Baldur's Gate 2 into Baldur's Gate, as well as adding 5 completely new subclasses, from my understanding, that weren't in either games. And I will say, I did notice that. I wouldn't have been able to pick any of them out per se, but when I was making my character, I was like, seems to definitely be more classes than I remember at the very least. And another addition mechanically, again, that they made to this game is that at the beginning of the game, you can now actually create an entire party of custom characters as opposed to having to use all of the numerous companions in the original game. So now, like in Icewind Dale, for instance, where you create a full party, you have that option in the Enhanced Edition as well. Beyond that, they added 2 new difficulty modes actually as well, Story and Legacy of Bale. So Story mode is basically an invincibility mode. It fully buffs your characters. It is impossible for them to die in combat, no less. So even if the buffs aren't cutting it, the game just will not let you die. It's God mode, but not quite, which you might ask yourself, why don't they just put in God mode? But in a lot of ways, I actually do think the story mode is better, just as an aside, because the story mode still kind of forces you to interact, at least partially, with some of the mechanics, which I think is going to lead people to learning about them, and potentially playing the game on a difficulty beyond story mode. Whereas just a straight up God mode, which story mode is very close to, I don't think would have actually done that. But with some of that stuff out of the way, I want to talk more directly about some of my memories of things. So for starters, it's been fun for me kind of remembering this edition of Dungeons & Dragons. And truth be told, I couldn't even begin to tell you like what this game adapted from 2nd edition as opposed to what was actually rules as written for 2nd edition. I personally mostly played 3.5 when I was in high school, so 4th edition had actually recently released, but everybody hated it, so we still used 3.5. And my point there is that while the game and just D&D in general is for the most part good enough to get you by there, as long as you understand just core concepts, like in 2nd edition, the lower your armor class is actually better. So just little things like that. So it's not like world moving, but my point is my knowledge of that edition isn't as robust, and thus it would be hard for me to pick apart flaws in how they adapted it. And then to Beamdog's credit, I will actually say I am having a much better time with the game's clunkiness, if you will. I remember in high school playing this game and having more trouble with the interface. And when I was playing the new Enhanced Edition, I was like, I remember this being much more of a hassle, and I looked it up, and Beamdog did actually make substantial changes to the UI layout and everything, from the original game, that is. So it was just kind of funny 10 plus years later being like, this isn't exactly how I remember it, despite me not being able to like pinpoint exactly what had changed. And then probably the last thing I want to mention is that there's a ton of stuff to explore in Baldur's Gate, and unfortunately most of it is empty. And I don't know if it was just my sense of adventure, so to speak, back in high school, but I don't remember them being so empty. Playing through this again now, like the vast majority of explorable territory in the game is not useful at all. You can go to places and even do a side quest in a little map, and what you actually need to do that side quest in is maybe a quarter of the map that is there, and the rest of that map is just going to be like enemies and the occasional hidden item. Like, you could have cut all of that out, and I would have gotten the same experience out of this. And that in particular is probably the place, in my opinion, that the game shows its age the most. Because beyond that, and ignoring, of course, some of the antiquated framework that the game has to run on to be the original game in any capacity, really. But beyond those things, the game itself still holds up really well. That is to say, the writing and everything. So just as a quick evaluation of it, from my standpoint, that's probably why this game has enjoyed such praise over the decades now, is that despite it getting on in years and absolutely aging, you got to remember that this game came out in 1998. And if I were to play this in 1998 and just look at the sheer scope of what was available, even though some of it might not, by current today's standards, be all that great, at the time this was massive. And it actually still holds up pretty well today, which I think goes to show you just how well of a job they did implementing this game into the Dungeons & Dragons universe. So there you go, guys. I hope that wasn't too rambly for everybody, kind of just off-the-cuff video. I just kind of wanted to talk about some of the changes that were actually made by the Enhanced Edition and just kind of my general memories of the game as opposed to the Enhanced Edition. I'm very, very excited to get to Siege of Dragonspear because that is completely new content for me. The base game, again, I had played through some of the stuff I'd obviously forgotten. It's been like 10 plus years, but for the most part, I was very aware of what the main story was. Siege of Dragonspear, though, I have no idea. I know there's like some Crusaders or something involved, but that's about it. So very much so looking forward to covering that when I actually get to that part of the game. But in the meantime, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, please remember to like, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube jazz. But in the meantime, truly, just thank you so much for watching. The channel's growing every day, and I couldn't do that without you guys. So honestly, just thank you. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.